We are live. Hi
Awesome.
everyone. I'm really excited to host Metaverse Luke, the host of Welcome to the Metaverse podcast. I really admire all the content he has put out there on the podcast. It's very inspiring and knowledgeable. So I'm excited to host you. Thanks, Luke, for joining the
Thank you
show.
for having me. Thanks for the kind words. And yeah, good to be on. I'm looking forward to it. So thanks so much.
Yeah. So Luke, can you walk us through some of the highlights from your career till date?
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting space because I think everyone has a different journey into this world and this new kind of sort of area that is converging. All paths are coming towards the metaverse. So yeah, my story is that I've been a presenter. So I've been a TV presenter for 10 years really. So across in the UK, across shows that would be known internationally on the X Factor. I did their behind the scenes kind of presenting and the voice, and then some radio and TV here. So I've done that for a long time, and I've loved it, and it's been great. And I also worked with kids as well did some kids TV. So so I've been doing that for 10 years, and then I found out about Bitcoin in 2017 and started learning a lot about that. And kind of I was very lucky, like I got in randomly just in the bull market phase of the end of 2017. And I was like, oh, this world's great. And it's really easy. You just sort of put a bit of money in and it goes up. It's like, why would I do anything else? And then the bear market happened and Bitcoin crashed. And in over those 4 years, I like really spent the time learning about cryptocurrency more. And so a combination of that and then also watching the ways that kids and young people socialize now and also consume content now. So like a lot of kids do hang out in Roblox and Fortnite, right? That's how they kind of meet up with friends online, especially over the pandemic. And those worlds became really interesting. And then the kind of crypto worlds combined with these virtual worlds around sort of 2017, native virtual world. So yeah, I began to learn about that stuff and then started the podcast in May of 2017. So that was kind of my journey into it all. So yeah, that's kind of my story so far. And it's been great. Podcast has been brilliant. Like lots of amazing guests from the industry, and I've been able to use my presenting skills from before to do that. And that's now what I'm doing pretty much full time, which is really exciting. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, like, I'm very curious to know when you started your blockchain and metaverse journey. Did you find it overwhelming? Like, what were some challenges you faced in this journey?
Yeah, it's a really good question because I think it's a world unlike anything else, really. So yeah, there's definitely like a steep learning curve. I think like the biggest thing for a lot of people, especially when I speak to people who are a little bit older than us, like my parents and stuff, I think anyone who's I don't know, not to put an exact age on it, but like 40, 50 plus have generally grown up in a very physical world where like when they listen to music they maybe bought LPs or CDs and it was a physical thing that they listened to and they had the album artwork, for example, or they'd, if you were buying clothes you'd go to the shops physically to the high street and stuff. So there's this switch of understanding that digital things that you can't hold and don't necessarily exist in the physical world can have real value. And that's like I think the first stumbling block that a lot of people have, because it's like especially for Bitcoin, it's like, well, yeah, but what's it backed by, and you can't hold it, and it's like the equivalent would be gold in the physical world, and Bitcoin gets called digital gold a lot because it's scarce and has a finite resource. So that I think is the biggest hurdle for most people, is understanding that digital things can have value. But actually, when you really think about it, it is quite obvious, because we are living already in a world, like we're doing this conversation over Zoom, right? I can't hold a Zoom. That's making sense. It's a digital thing. Or like, you text people on WhatsApp, or you share your life on Instagram digitally. So all these things happen. And actually, like the biggest companies in the world, probably Facebook and Amazon and Google, are all digitally native products that have a huge value. So that's I think the biggest hurdle for people to kind of initially sort of accept and like it's something to learn. And I think, I mean, the numbers say a lot, because like I grew up kind of watching TV, and if you've seen how content's changed, how people consume content, like 10 years ago, people would maybe watch in the UK, I'm talking about, at least I'm sure it's the same in the US as well, there'd be a limited amount of channels on the TV, right? You might choose 1 to 5 or whatever. And then the internet came and it sort of took away the gatekeepers of making content. So then YouTube was there and anyone could make content. And then suddenly you have this whole range of streaming services and YouTube to watch. And so, yeah, those trends are all changing to a more digitally native, people first kind of experience. And that's kind of how we're all living now. So I see it as like the bigger trends are just, are we going into a more digital world or a less digital world? Like it's very much more digital. And the aim of the metaverse isn't to get rid of the physical world. Like no one would want that like this. And, you know, I think it's just about the time we spend. Like, I don't know how many hours a day you spend on your phone. For me, it's like loads, like 7 or 8 hours. It's about making those experiences better, right? Like more immersive. So you feel more connected to people rather than just more screen time. It's actually like making those things feel better. So I think that's kind of the bigger picture of it all. But all the trends are converging to come together and you know, bring the world closer together with people in different time zones, like this conversation, for example, and also business and e-commerce and everything. I'm sure we'll chat about some of that stuff. But yeah, it's like the world can be really brought together with a virtual existence. So yeah, it's all those trends coming together, I'd say.
I see. And like, how do you keep up with all these trends?
Yeah, also another good question. Like it is almost a full-time job just keeping up with what's going on, because it moves at lightning speed, this space, both the kind of NFT world, which is, you know, a whole other thing to understand, but really has the same trends. Like initially when you see a JPEG and it's being sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're like, what is that? Doesn't make any sense. Why would I buy a picture that I can't, you know, I'd have to display digitally and whatever. But it's the same thing going on. You know, it's like those things now with blockchain technology, you can prove as I'm sure you know, prove the scarcity and the ownership of the digital assets. So it's the real revolution in all of this is that digital things can now have value in the same way as like a limited physical art piece. So that's technology underneath. But yeah, how do I keep up with it? I mean, a lot of it's really, it is on Twitter and it's about following people in the space. I mean, like, you know, previously in the fully physical world, like they say you're the average of 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And if you surround yourself by people who are smart in the space and who are putting out great content, and it's great that lots of that is free as well. Like I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and as you begin to follow like the movers and shakers in the industry and the people who are pushing things forwards, you start to see the people they're following, and you get recommended that. So really, Twitter is the way I keep up. Of most projects, if we talk about NFTs specifically, new drops and stuff happen on Discord. I think there is a shift now where there's so much supply, there's so many new NFT projects all the time. You have to work a little bit harder to go a little bit deeper and research who are the founders, like what else have they done? Have they got a roadmap that actually makes sense that they got to execute on, rather than just promising all these things from a project that, you know, that they might not be able to deliver on. So you have to work a little bit harder, but you can find those people, and then you start to get like a bit of a sixth sense of like, oh, who's actually in this for the right reasons? Like they've been around for a long time, they're building for the long term, always adding and looking after their communities, versus the kind of cash grabs that will naturally happen as well. So yeah, it's Twitter and Discord, I'd say, the places I spend the most time, and then a bit, you know, educating myself on YouTube as well. And yeah, so it's all those virtual services again, you know, it's the way it goes.
See. Yeah, and it's very important that you mention about like right now there's so many new NFT projects. Like now it's important how we filter out those projects according to like the vision we have, how we align with those projects. It's an important skill. Like attention is scarce, and like how do you spend your energy on the projects which resonate with you is gonna be important.
Yeah, 100%. That's like a skill in itself. That it's just spending the time doing it, and like say, like learning the right people and credible projects, and the space moves quickly as well. You know, obviously it all started originally like an example of a really a project that's done amazingly well and built a whole culture. It's the Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? Yeah, apes are huge, and I think Universal just signed 4 ape NFTs to become these. To become a band, basically like a virtual first band, which is a whole another conversation in itself. But even when that's been an amazing success story, but they are 2D images, 2D JPEGs, which are cool and mean a lot more than that, because they give you access and various other things. But like now the space has moved on. So like a drop that is coming this week, that's really exciting, from Artifact Studios, who are big in the digital fashion world, called Clone X, and they are good example, RTFKT, of some amazing founders who have been really building for the long term and are really well respected, are dropping their PFP projects of 20,000 fully 3D avatars, and you're given the 3D files so you can, basically create a whole virtual influencer from their project. So, even the space moves on as well. So it's about, keeping up to date with both the good people and just where the space is at as a whole, because it's moving super quick. But it shouldn't be intimidating. It should be fun, and it's cool to find out about these things. And it's there's some funny memes, and there's a good online community, like as I'm sure you so it's fun place to be for sure.
I see. And what is your definition of metaverse?
Good question. Yes. So I think it's generally like it's a concept which refers to the future of the internet and our digital lives, which is going to be made up of a series of shared immersive 3D spaces where we kind of work, play, earn, own digital assets in across the world. And I think like the simplest way to think about it, as I kind of mentioned, is like we already have this sort of digital existence currently, with our phones, and how much time we spend texting friends or emails for work or Zoom for work, or like Instagram sharing our lives. Like we have this digital existence, but it doesn't yet feel immersive because we're using a device. We're doing it through a phone all the time, or a computer. So the metaverse is really the future of these immersive spaces. And I think it covers completely virtual worlds where you can put on, if you've ever worn like an Oculus headset, it is mind blowing because you can create anything, and you can, like work in spaces with different physical rules, because gravity obviously doesn't apply in the virtual world. And then it also crosses over to augmented reality, which is those virtual elements mapped onto the physical world. So there's interesting examples of that. Like I saw a video recently where, like at the minute, if you're driving, obviously you have your phone and maybe Google Maps showing you where to go, and you're following a blue dot, but your eyes are going from the road to the map to see where you're going. Whereas in the future, the AR will be built into the windscreen, and the actual arrows will be almost as if they're projected onto the road. So you'll just be following it in real augmented reality. So that's really interesting. So that kind of combines both worlds. And I think the physical world will be another version that's part of the whole metaverse. It'll be like the combination of virtual, augmented, and physical worlds. That'd be my definition, loosely.
I see. So like the blend between physical and digital would be so seamless that without any friction, like one would be like entering those realities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is gonna happen, and it is already happening in parts. Like you can see that trend like accelerating, and I think when those things all come together, we'll be fully in the metaverse, and there'll be certain situations where we want to be fully virtual, where if we're having a meeting with lots of people all around the world, but you want to be able to like really feel an interaction with them, or show them, something like a 3D model or something like that, like the virtual space will be the best place to do that. Or if you want to go to, imagine there'll be like metaverse universities, which will open access to so many people. Like if you've got an internet connection, you can all go to metaverse uni and learn from the best teachers in the world, like in one place, and the virtual worlds will be great for that. And then the augmented world will be, things that are more local to us, like kind of driving or walking down the street, and just there'll be, I'm sure, like you'll walk past the Apple store and the Apple logo will sort of turn into something virtual. And maybe this is good or bad, I don't know, but like, like tell you what's going on in the shop and stuff. So it'll be like a really crazy immersive experience mapped onto the physical world. And then sometimes you'll want to remove yourself from that. Like today, we're on our phones for most of the time. Also, sometimes you want to read a book and you just want to unplug, and like that world is still going to be super important and crucial. But like in the same way, like how much has laptops and phones and the internet changed our existence? That is going to be the change that's coming for the metaverse. I think so there's so much opportunity there because a lot of our life is going to be in that world.
I see. And like, what are current existing metaverse projects which one should be aware of?
Yeah, so there's I think there's a distinction between the kind of centralized virtual worlds and the decentralized ones. So obviously, lots of people will have seen the Facebook Meta news recently. So that's kind of confirmation of what is going on. Really, that Facebook are moving to become a metaverse company, and they've changed their name to Meta, and they're building their version of virtual worlds. So Facebook Horizon is their kind of quite like low poly type, simple kind of graphics, but it's going to be easy to use. And Facebook are great at onboarding people into their virtual world. So they've got their like workroom spaces for these kind of things that we've talked about. So there's kind of Facebook and what they're building there, and that'll be interesting. Then you've got the kind of existing worlds that are less immersive. So Facebook's offering is with Oculus and fully VR. You've also got at the minute something like Roblox, which primarily people associate with younger kids or teenagers, and it's not fully immersive in that way, but it is a 3D world that kids go and socialize in, and you can play games in Roblox, and it's valued at $40 billion, and there's 40 million users a day in it. So like, this stuff is already really happening. And Fortnite is another one where they've had amazing gigs in Fortnite. So various artists have performed there, and like, yes, it's an avatar doing it, and I'd always at the minute prefer a physical gig over a virtual one, but sometimes you can't get to a physical gig, and actually the virtual gig offers a different experience that it's not necessarily better or worse than physical. It's just different. Like Ariana Grande did a tour there, and like as the songs play and she performs, the whole environment changes around you to match like the lyrics and stuff. So you can do all these things in these virtual worlds, and they're this kind of centralized offering. So obviously run by companies and have a single point of failure. So if Roblox suddenly decide to discontinue Roblox and you spend hundreds of thousands of pounds buying digital t-shirts for your avatar, or like paying for those gigs or whatever, and earning things from the time spent in those worlds, and those companies decide to discontinue it or go down or whatever, then your value is locked with those companies, right? So that's kind of the centralized part of the virtual worlds and metaverse, which isn't not necessarily bad or good. It's just one option. And then the other side, which is built on blockchain and are the decentralized worlds, which people are generally most excited about, especially if you're into this space, because it's not owned by a company. You own all your data and your items as NFTs, right? So all those digital things, whether it's items for your character or digital fashion that you have for your avatar or artwork, you own them outright, and you can also trade them on an open market in these various different worlds. So that's kind of like the thing that most people are excited about, is that pure like ownership of the users and players with NFTs in the decentralized world. So some examples of those, the biggest ones, Decentraland is one of the most well-known ones. So went public in about I think 2020. I think it went fully public. I'm not sure actually, but yeah, it's been around they've been building since like 2015. But so there's digital land that has been bought there, and digital real estate that's being built on this land. And so they just had the Metaverse festival, so artists played as avatars in there, and people could buy tickets, and there's a VIP area, and also like there's a fully functioning casino in Decentraland, so you can go and use their native token mana to use the casino. And they're even employing people as avatars in the casino to show other people who come in how to use it. So there's this whole like digital economy that's being born from people in there. So Decentraland's like one of the ones that's most exciting. And when you first go on it, like visually, graphically, it's early really compared to some high end like Unreal Engine 5 stuff. But that's all coming. That will take time. But it's really the fundamentals are so different in that everything in that world is owned by somebody as an NFT. So you've got Decentraland. The Sandbox is a really interesting one that I'm really excited about. It's kind of like the decentralized offering of Roblox. So it's like USP is that you can build kind of games within the world. So they've got like an easy game maker program you can download where you don't need to have any coding knowledge necessarily to kind of build these games. And yeah, then you can obviously own the land, build whatever you want there, and people can come and play your games. Or in the future, you can rent your land out to businesses who might want to have a virtual event in the Sandbox. It's cool. Another big one is Somnium Space, and that's built more for immersive VR. So Decentraland and the Sandbox are usually on a computer. Is how you experience it. The Sandbox about to launch quite soon to the public. Somnium Space is very much built for VR, so it'll be very immersive. Similar thing, the land you can buy and own and develop on, and on all those things are probably like the three kind of biggest ones. There are many more that are coming up all the time, but I'd say like those the ones, because they're all slightly different, are good places to start probably for virtual worlds at the moment would be the ones I'm most excited about. Yeah, there are more, but I could go on forever. So.
I see. Like those sound quite interesting. So, like, what is your piece of advice for someone who wants to get started in this metaverse world? Like, first is for programmer, and second for artists. Like, do they just buy a piece of land and start building, or should they learn first?
Yeah, it's I think it depends what you want to do. Like if you've got like a programming background, then I think like one of the most sought after jobs over the next 10 years is going to be to understand Solidity, and to be, if you can develop and stuff like that, if you want to do that, and smart contracts to build kind of NFTs in various forms. That could be art, or it could be land, or it could be anything. Uh, so if you're from that background, it's not a background that I have, but like uh, as somebody who is working in that world, like it's those people are really sought after, and that'll be, you know, if you have some developing knowledge, I'd develop a knowledge. I'd really recommend looking into Solidity. That's how what most stuff is built on. Yeah, and then if you just want to get into this world, I think it's great to have some education first, because like anything, if you go into it cold, it's kind of like overwhelming and sort of doesn't really make full sense. But yeah, at this stage, I think like it's, you know, there's always risk with everything, because you're looking at a broader market cycle as well. So the, you know, the cycles in terms of like the crypto cycles work in different ways, and nobody can exactly predict the future, but you can time it badly. So really what I'm saying is like have a long-term view on this stuff. So if you're going to buy land, or you're going to buy an NFT and you've done your research and you think it's a good thing, I'd say probably expect to hold it for kind of 4 years minimum, and with money that you don't need, you know, over that time, and don't ever risk more than you can afford to lose, would be like the bottom line. But yeah, like looking at these worlds and buying land, like the sandbox is really interesting, because it's about to launch to the public, and you know they're using the similar model to Roblox really, and Roblox is, you know, if there's 40 million users a day on Roblox and it's growing all the time, if the sandbox even takes a tiny percent of their like audience, then that's going to be a huge area that I think will be really interesting. So yeah, buying land and holding it, I think at this stage is probably a good idea generally. But yeah, getting educated will just give you the confidence to make those purchases and know what you're buying, and also then hold on to them for longer, because you know their worth. Like if you buy something and you get it right, like it does go up in value. Lots of people have sold far too early because they haven't got the knowledge of what's coming. So yes, I think the education is probably the key place to start on NFTs and decentralized virtual worlds and the broader metaverse. Yeah.
I see. And like, what's your speculative vision with the metaverse? Do you envision like Ready Player One like setting in future, or like what do you
Yeah,
think?
to a degree, yes. Like I think it feels very futuristic and sci-fi, but like it's all moving that way so quickly. And I just think like every brand, whatever you do this is gonna be where the attention goes, right? And like where the attention goes, everyone else follows. So if you want to capitalize on that, it's gonna be in these virtual worlds, and it's just a better, richer experience. I mean, even if you think about, take like fashion for example, like I think in 10 years or even 5 years, it will seem crazy that we scroll through like 2D web pages, like looking at clothes, thinking, oh, maybe that will fit. I'll order it, get kind of guessing, and then trying it on. And then maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Whereas in the future, like we will go into a fully 3D shop with an avatar that's probably mapped to your exact body dimensions. And then you can literally pick up a jacket or whatever that is, the right 3D size. You can try it on with your avatar, and then you feel like, yeah, that definitely looks good. You could even then, I don't know, go on an experience with a designer who designed it, like by pressing a button, and then you're up a mountain because I don't know who's inspired by a trip to the mountain, whatever it is. You know, like the experience of doing anything would just be so much more immersive and better. That like it's always funny when you look back at like what seems old today from 10 years ago. What will seem old, I think, is that we sat on a 2D phone for hours of an evening scrolling through 2D Instagram images that were just like flat images, or on a shopping site, but that was seen old. So yeah, I think like, I mean, Ready Player One, yes, I think it will become that way more and more. I think it's if you watch the Facebook keynote, it's like 2 hours long. It's a long video, but it does show you what's coming, and especially like gaming is a whole other thing we can talk about. But I think I think it's going to be a really fun place to be. There are some challenges. Do we want Facebook to own everything? Like in Ready Player One is owned by corporations. Like that's the thing that we need to ideally not happen. Like, yes, there can be that option of big corporations being involved, but they can't own everything in an immersive way. Would be a bad outcome, I think. So, and people are working hard on that at the minute. But yeah, ultimately, I think like Ready Player One isn't too far off. Hopefully it's less dystopian because we are building the right way. But in terms of the experience, I think it's eventually not going to be too dissimilar to that. Yeah.
I see. And like based on your experience in this metaverse, like what are areas of improvement or opportunities you see currently in the metaverse world?
Yeah, so I think it's funny because there's so much opportunity. It's sometimes hard to find your place in it and be like, right, well, how can I? You can see this is all happening, but like, how can I A, get involved, and B, kind of capitalize on it? So right now, I think if you already know about this stuff and you've been kind of watching from the sidelines for a while, like education is a great area to be because there's so many people who are going to need to know this stuff. And if you have that knowledge and you can explain it clearly, which is kind of what my podcast is really about, I think that's a good place to be because people are just starting to come across after the Facebook news, but it's a little bit like when social media hit and brands took a long time to really build that into their companies and realize how valuable like having a Twitter account or Instagram account was. So we're like right at the beginning of that again. So there's so many kind of companies who are going to need education. So if you kind of are into this space already and thinking where you sit, I think that is an area that's interesting. I think like otherwise, really just following the NFT space, you see these success stories and it always feels too late. Like, oh, I've missed 4 yacht clubs and that club, and now they're like 35 ETH and it's hundreds of $1,000s, and you feel like you've missed it. But like, there's so much more to come. That there'll be multiple projects like that are going to have huge success, and so we're definitely really early with that, and it starts to break down into niches as well. Like I think this whole kind of movement reminds me of when YouTube started, and there was at first people thought it was kind of a bit odd. There was just sort of cat videos and it was a bit of a waste of time. And then slowly people started making content. It was like, oh, that's quite good. And then it broke into lots of different niches. So, if you were just an entertainment YouTuber, that's great. But then there's also like really specific. You could be a cycling influencer and then you've got your audience there. So whatever your thing is, if it doesn't already exist as an NFT, like why not think about starting that, or like really being specific in a niche and beginning to buy digital assets and just experimenting with money that you can afford to lose, obviously. But I think the best way to learn is actually doing it, seeing how that transaction works, and then you kind of want to do it sort of more and more and learn more and more by doing. So I think, just really getting stuck in that area. And then, like land is another interesting area, like we've talked about briefly. Like there are still opportunities, especially in the sandbox. Is a really good virtual world to look into, I think, because the land is still relatively cheap there. It's not like nothing, but it's I think the opportunity is still, the upside is still a lot of upside there. So I'd certainly look in there, and then look out for other virtual worlds because there'll be many more. There's one called Victoria VR, which is another immersive one built for VR, but it's built with the Unreal Engine, so it's going to be super photorealistic, and that's at a very early stage. So there's lots more opportunities to come. So I think kind of education, maybe think about how your own NFTs, depending on what niche you're in and what business you do. There's NFTs have so much range. Art is the first use case, but then there's loads more for various industries. So that's at a really good place now. Land as well is really interesting. And just delivering value in some way, like whether if you want to build a social account about that, like there's people are looking to learn all the time. So a few different ways there. I'm sure there's more as well, but off the top of my head, I think that's probably the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great piece of advice. So what are some interesting break in NFT space you have observed?
So I'm sorry, it cut out time bits. Breaking projects, was it?
Yeah, like breakthrough or interesting projects.
Yeah, in the NFT space. Yeah, so I think there's lots of cool things that are going on at the minute. So yeah, I mean, like Bored Ape Yacht Club's very famous, and if people are into the space, they won't need me to tell them about it. But like, it's been really interesting how that's built a culture around stuff. So initially, at first glance, it's an image of an ape, which doesn't seem particularly exciting, but it's become like access to a membership club and a kind of grassroots, quite exciting membership club. And then at NFT NYC, obviously they had the big ape fest. So if you had an ape, like you had access to amazing people, also like crazy parties, whether that's your thing or not. And now like they're launching a band off the back of it. So you have this like you're part of this bigger brand and you get to share the upside on whatever they do. And with Bored Ape Yacht Club, you also own the IP of your ape. So people have started businesses off the side of it with their ape as the artwork. So someone started a beer brand, someone else a coffee brand, someone started a book called Jenkins the Ballet, which is the name of one of the apes, and that's been signed by a major agent in Hollywood before the book's even been written. So like you own a part of this bigger culture. So looking for kind of culture plays like that, I think are really interesting. And following then, so obviously that's like an obvious one, like slightly less obvious ones. There's one called the Heart Project, which I like, which is trying to decentralize access to kind of the entertainment industry. So it's run by a guy who's quite well known in the sort of Hollywood scene, but basically if you own one of their NFTs, you can propose what to do with their fund, basically creative projects as part of their what's called their DAO, their decentralized autonomous organization. And if they're making like a music video, and everyone who owns the NFT will get a share of the profits of the music video. So like that's a cool space, that thing that they're doing. There's a really famous collector called 888 who has some of the most amazing early NFT art pieces. Who is so it's just about to launch something called the Eternal, We Are Eternal, I think it's called, which is basically they are fractionalizing. He has various amazing collections, and he puts them in vaults. So there's one vault that's worth like $8 million of NFT artwork, and they're basically fractionizing it. So they're doing a 10,000 piece NFT drop, which are going to be characters which you obviously can own, but it's your token to a portion of that vault, basically. So it's like owning like a piece of vault of loads of Picassos and Monets or whatever, if you believe this space is really going to grow into what we think it is. So that's like really cool because you can get access to a piece of like, some amazing artwork, and the different rarities of the 10,000 NFTs they're releasing. If you get a rare one, you'll own more of the vault type thing. So that's like another interesting model. Gaming is a thing. I wrote a piece on gaming, which is a whole nother area that's going to be completely disrupted, I think, because just that fundamental point of being able to own your digital assets as NFTs. When you think about the gaming space, which is the biggest entertainment space in the world, bigger than music and the music and film industry like put together, and the whole esports side, like it's worth hundreds of billions a year. And now blockchain games are coming out where, traditionally, if you're a gamer, you would pay for the game, like pay for the title, and you'd play it and you'd get enjoyment out of it. But sometimes you'd also want to level up or buy skins for the game, or if it's FIFA, and you want to do the like FIFA Ultimate Team stuff, then you pay for points and that, things like that. And so you buy the title, and then you also pay more money for the game. But then when you're done with the game, all of your value's locked with the game studios, right? You've just paid more. Whereas with blockchain gaming, the time you put in and the assets you earn from the games, if you play them a long time and you level up or you get new skins or whatever, you own as NFTs. So it's the play to earn model, where the longer you play, the more time you invest, the more actual money you can make from being a gamer. So that world is fascinating. So there's some really interesting games. There's one called Big Time, which is made by, I think it's one of the main developers on Fortnite, has moved across. Like a lot of gaming talent is coming to the blockchain gaming world. I wrote a whole piece on lots of interesting games that I'm watching very closely. That's another section. So I think that's really interesting. Artifact Studios, as I mentioned, just everything that they're doing, they are really becoming the supreme like fashion brand of the metaverse. So they're doing amazing collaborations and really unique drops. And about to release their Avatar project, which I think is going to change the game again. So watch what they're doing very closely. And I think like anything, also there's this whole kind of world of meme coins, right? Which like fundamentally are based on nothing and are like quite a dangerous place to invest. But also like the internet loves shareable, funny, viral things. So there's a game that I'm really bullish on called Chicken Derby, which is basically like you own a chicken NFT and you can race them against each other. And for money, it's kind of like horse racing. There's Zed Run is a crypto horse racing game that exists, but this is like it's like Mario Kart meets horse racing for NFTs, which is an insane sentence, but is I think like when I've spoken to my friends who aren't really into this stuff, they kind of laugh at that and they've wanted to get involved. And I think sometimes you have to like take off the hat of like what's what is going to catch here as well, like what's just going to be fun to share regardless of any of the tech, really, because most people, as much as kind of like I'm sure you and me like love what's underneath all this stuff, for a lot of the public they just want to have fun, and if they can make money racing a stupid digital chicken, like that will probably do quite well. So yeah, that's a game that I'm quite bullish on, that's launching quite soon as well. So there's all these different areas, and sports is another whole, the social tokens for teams and stuff, and there's So Rare is a football trading card game, Top Shot's been a massive basketball collectibles game. So yeah, the more you kind of spend time in the space, there are so many, but I think like latching onto either really credible founders who have been building for a while and have proved that they are good is a great tactic. So doing your research on like the founders, who's credible, and then also like who has an audience there already, whether if it's a sporting NFT, like is there a active engaged audience around a certain sport and they're about to launch an NFT project on it, it's probably going to do quite well because there's a big audience there. Yeah, so sorry, it's quite a lot of information in that, but they're some of the areas that I like continuously watch and will occasionally pull the trigger on some projects on those. Yeah,
I think like that was super insightful. Like I'm just taking notes of like things to follow after this
good.
interview.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So my next question is based on your observation in this space about projects which were successful, projects which were not that successful or failed. Like, what are some lessons learned that you would like to share for people who are planning to start a new project soon? Like
To start
about
a new project, yeah,
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 and
that's really interesting area for sure, and a good question. I think like the best thing that I've already said, but is to really think about, rather than if you're I saw somebody tweet like, if you're doing an NFT drop to make money, you won't make money, because if that's your pure goal, people will probably like suss that out quite quickly. So I think it's really about now building in long-term value to a community, which is a bit of a buzz phrase in the NFT world, but like how can you offer value to somebody who's going to invest in you over the long term, right? So if they're going to buy your project, what can you give them over the long term? So that might be, it could be great artwork, and that's one thing. It could be cool. It could be access to something. So if you own the NFT, maybe get access to a private Discord about a topic or a niche that they're really into. It could be various other utilities. Maybe it unlocks other drops, or maybe it's collabs with other people, or maybe it unlocks physical things. So like it's an event ticket or something like that, or so I think it's now thinking on kind of at least a sort of 12-month period of what can you really continuously add to this. If you want to do like a serious drop that's going to last the test of time, is like you've really got to think beyond just a drop to make the cash and run type thing, because people are generally getting smarter about that stuff. That a lot of that did happen, but now I think it's more difficult. So it really depends what your niche is and what you want to do with it. So yeah, I mean, I try and think of a random example, but like, yeah, I mean, if you were a content creator like you are, like, what would be a good NFT project? Well, you could release, it could be artwork or anything that either gives people access to private videos, or like, about really specific content, or content first, or like gives your audience who buy that and invest in you like an extra level of access, to your content maybe, or like a percentage even of your profits going forward or whatever. So you reward people who kind of bought your NFT earlier. If they hold it and they're incentivized to hold it over the long term, they get maybe a monetary value, or whatever it is, or it's kind of in-person events, or loads of ways. Yeah, but I think it's hard now to just kind of do 10,000 of something, drop it and expect it to sell out. Like it's really got to have more than that now. So thinking for the long term, like how can you offer value in the same way as like if you do a YouTube channel, like if you just upload a video, then and then you're just only planning on doing 5, like they might be even really good videos, but probably you're not going to do well off that because you need to consistently be giving your audience value. And it's the same kind of mentality for NFTs. I think it's like, rather than what can you get from a sale, it's more like what actually can you give to people, and that will mean that you last longer. I think that's probably the like way to think about it now.
I see. And like, was there a moment from reading about blockchain or metaverse or watching a video that it was like life changing for you, that okay, this is gonna be a game changer?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think there was moments like that learning about Bitcoin really, and that's more the kind of finance side. So it's like a different conversation really. But it's I learned about. There's a really good book called The Bitcoin Standard by Saifuddin Ammous, which is kind of like a one that's regularly recommended to just understand what Bitcoin is and the history of money and why having an asset that nobody can make more of, a limited supply asset for thousands of years, that's been gold, and that's part of the reason why gold has held its value. Now we have a digital world, and Bitcoin is the digital asset which has a limited supply. So so kind of I had moments learning about Bitcoin where I was like, oh yeah, like there is really, it's like an amazing potential trade, in the sense that like the downside is what you invested. The upside, if this works and loads of smart people are on board with it, the upside is huge because the entire world is going to probably want some sort of access to this, and there's only a limited supply. So there's moments like that where I was like, whoa. But I think like the bigger trends are what all started to slot in and make sense for me. So for my journey, like as a TV presenter, and I'd worked in doing kids TV shows for a while, as much as I loved that, like when like 10 years ago in the UK, like a lot of the famous TV faces now were like kids presenters because they were on TV when there was only 5 channels, and the audience were kind of forced to watch those 5 channels. So those people got very well known and very famous. And as I started working in kids TV, the habits changed because I saw YouTube arrive. And I remember like speaking to my kind of manager person at the time, who was really nice, but I was like, I think this YouTube thing might be like quite big. And he was like, no, like it's not going to, no one's going to take them seriously. It's people in their bedroom making videos. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe. And so I didn't really jump on it that first time round, and then obviously watched it play out. And now YouTubers are huge. And there was a real like switch. It was, I think, the TV world had this like gatekeeper attitude that you had to like go through them to be like good enough to be put on a TV channel, and that's how it worked, and then suddenly the internet changed everything when the people can have essentially the power to make their own content, and if people want to watch that, well then the attention moves to them. And so I kind of watched that whole thing happen, and watch over 5 years, initially TV companies were like, we don't care about YouTubers. 5 years later, they couldn't pay them enough money to come on their shows because their audience was so big. And so a lot of like legacy industries, when you think about like print media, sometimes like newspapers and stuff, like their audience, they're still relevant and have value, but they like, it's like shrinking versus internet world, right? So when I'd kind of watched the YouTube thing happen, and I was like, digital assets and digital ownership and virtual worlds, is this trend happening again, where it's like pulling the power from the legacy big gatekeeper industries who can't adapt quick enough because they can't make the switch, and it's going against their business model, right? It's like, do the newspapers love Twitter? No, because everyone can kind of share news really quickly. It's like against their core business model, so they don't want to change. But like, if you don't change, you eventually lose the power because it's gone to the people who can do it. So yeah, this is the same thing for me happening again, both with like Bitcoin in terms of like owning your money outright and having ownership of that is kind of one thing, but then also this virtual world thing, like it's the evidence is already there, really. Like when you look at the Roblox numbers, you look at the Fortnite numbers, like it's no surprise there's going to go this way, and it's kind of unstoppable at this point. It won't be like a straight line up, like there'll be amazing moments and then there'll be things that go wrong and projects that go wrong and it all like crash, but the technology will fundamentally adopt quicker. And just watch the kind of user adoption of how many people are doing it, and it's growing exponentially. So it's the same thing. So like this time when I watched it, I was like, right, I'm getting involved in this early this time because it's going to play out the same way as all technology does eventually. Like people were scared of mobile phones like tell it, well, we're going to stop speaking to people face to face, but do virtual things. Oh, that won't happen. Like, look what we're doing it right now. Like, it became, I don't want to say obvious because that sounds like arrogant, and I might be wrong, of course, but it all kind of lined up in a moment, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm pretty sure this is where everything's going. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Hello.
I see. So
Hey guys.
yeah, hi Daniel. Yeah.
Hey, I was just wondering. I just want to like ask a quick question because it sounds very interesting what he's saying, and it reminds me a lot, kind of like if you follow like biology, like he kind of speaks of like how this is kind of changing like the whole structure of society in a way, and we haven't like seen it quite like it's just starting to pick up, right? Like you just mentioning some things that are kind of like similar, where like you had the rise of YouTube, and then you had like the rise of social media. And I remember at the beginning, like in the right before 2010, companies didn't really have media handles, right? Like they didn't have their own Twitter, they didn't have their own Instagram. And then all of a sudden that became kind of like, if you don't have like a social media person in your company, then how are you reaching out to people?
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, what is, I guess, from the crypto blockchain and the metaverse world, what do you think would be like the next kind of like evolution of that, where like companies now become, or like they would have to take some part of this world, right? And I think we've seen it with like Visa, where they bought the NFT. So I'm just curious, like, what your thoughts about that were.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. What you've said there is like, that's how it all moved, isn't it? It's like companies are sort of like wary of it at first, and then it flips to big, like, you need a social presence if you're gonna really like have an relationship with your customers. That became like a fundamental thing that every company needed. I think just the fact of having a presence in these virtual worlds of some sort is going to be the same thing here. So companies who don't have either a store in an area of Decentraland or the Sandbox, or aren't throwing virtual events, or don't have an NFT collection where they can offer their audience and their customers something more, something interesting and exciting, and a reason for them to give their attention to that company. Like companies who adapt and do that early will be some of the biggest companies in the future, I think, or ones that are completely digitally native. So I've mentioned this Artifact Studios a lot, but they haven't had a legacy backstory. They started in 2020 as a digital fashion brand, and everyone was like, why would anyone buy digital sneakers? But that's what primarily they do, is kind of digital fashion. But now it's becoming very obvious that actually, in the same way as, why would you buy a brand of sneakers in the physical world? Really, it's because you want that bit of association with the brand, and you want to kind of some social credit, right? Like, you want, if other people see you wearing those shoes, it's like, oh, you're that type of person, or like, oh, they look cool, it's a flex or whatever. In the digital world, it's exactly the same thing. Like, it's just humans in a different setting, right? So humans are still going to want to flex in the digital world, or show that they are associated with a certain brand, or in the same way as like, why is having like a blue verified tick like sought after on Instagram or Twitter? Because it's like social proof, right? So it's just humans, doing the same things they've always done in a different setting. So I think brands, if they want to be relevant and move with the future, they just have to have a presence there, whatever that is for their brand. It'll be different for depending on what they do, but they just need to be involved in some way, I think. Otherwise they'll lose out to fast moving digital native brands, would be my guess. Good question, though.
Yeah, I see. And like, building upon the previous answer, you mentioned about the YouTube rise, and you wish you would have. So, is there anything else like you wish you would have done differently, or you regret?
It's always that with hindsight, isn't it? Like, I watched the Bored Apes thing happen, and I was like, it just felt. And I also had early access to Top Shot, which is the NBA basketball like digital collectibles, kind of like Pokemon cards, but for basketball, and in their collectible video moments. For anyone who doesn't know, but I had like early access to it, and I was like, $60 for like a digital. I just hadn't made that switch yet. I was like, that seems like a lot for something that I can't. I was going through that phase as well. So passed on like loads of stuff that really at the beginning you could have bought basically anything, and it all has been fairly like legacy stuff. It's a little bit more difficult now, although there's loads of opportunities still. So yeah, I kind of wish I'd adapted even quicker than I did. But generally, I'm happy with sort of. I think it's just, if you want to be involved, it's just starting something, whatever that is. If it's a YouTube channel, and that feels, when you're doing like a great job, and it's like, it feels like, oh well, there's lots of people doing YouTube channels, yeah, but not really on this space, and it just gives you a reason to meet people, right? Like we probably wouldn't have met if you didn't have the channel. I hadn't heard the podcast and didn't reach out. Like it gives you a reason to build your network. So just starting something, whatever that is, like it could be content, or it could be an NFT drop of some sort that, you know, might not at first sell out. That's fine if it's for the right reasons, you know, just doing something. And yeah, because it's like it, you know, it's the same thing like I was saying before. Those early kind of content creators on YouTube like didn't really know what they were doing, and sometimes their content wasn't the best either. But it didn't really matter because they just got the audience before the rest of the world moved in on it, so they were ahead of everyone. So when the algorithms are recommending you for stuff like there first, so I think it's just like, yeah, just doing stuff, whatever it is. So I'm like happy that I've moved in that space, and like yeah, it started for me, the podcast and stuff has been great, and we'll see, time will tell whether it's a good decision. But yeah, I don't think I have any regrets so much, other than things that I missed. But also you have to, I think, develop you'll drive yourself mad. I think everyone has passed on good projects, everyone has bought a good project and sold it too early, and everyone has hung on to something they thought was going to be great and it's turned out to not be. And you just have to like be okay with it all. You know, you're not going to hit everyone, and just keep being consistent over time, and eventually you will hit something that is good, whether that is a business you start in this space, or whether if you're a collector of NFTs, you'll learn, and you have to kind of, like anything in life, really, you have to go through those learning phases and get a few things wrong, and then eventually you get a tuned sense of how to do it. So yeah, I think it's just consistency and learning and doing something, rather than just watching and letting it pass you by, you know, if you really want to be involved in this space.
I see.
Mayor,
yeah.
I have another quick question for him, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I just curious, like, how do you see, for example, like you were just talking about, like this Hollywood guy that he was creating some sort of DAO, and like you see kind of like the proliferation of all these types of let's say organizations, right? And if they start kind of like developing, I guess in a way they're kind of like some sort of corporation, right? But it's mostly like, instead of like you're outside buying shares, the people that are kind of like the initial users, they get kind of like they get pre-IPO access in a way. And I was just curious, like, do you see like the rise of all these organizations that eventually they began to compete with like kind of like real business or corporations, where like now they're, I guess in a way, working with services at large scales and maybe dealing with other types of corporations like that?
Yeah, I think like there's going to be quite a big power shift, because you can see it happen over time. Like with, say, the music world, right? For example, 10 years ago, if you were a band and you had, whatever, had 4 people and you made some music, like your only real chances at success was to go to a record label and like hope you get signed and kind of do like what they want you to do to maybe break through and make it, right? And then there's been, like, people talk about web 1.0, 2.0, and this new world is web 3.0. And like, if an example of the bands, like the label has been still important, because originally that it was kind of for distribution and for funding of the band, right? To potentially make them successful, they needed some money to go and record the tracks properly, and then they needed the network of industry people to get their track to radio stations and everything else. But then when Web 2 happened in social media, it's like, the labels became a little bit less relevant, because now actually the best type of distribution and awareness is building a social following, right? Making content and having, if you have 1 million followers on Twitter, like you can probably begin to sell your music without the kind of network of the record labels so much, because you can get to all those people. Everyone's accessible now, and also you've got a massive audience that's your own audience. So kind of the labels became a little bit less relevant. This time with like Web 3, it's like the ownership switch, right? So Web 2 kind of made information like access easier between people. Web 3 in the metaverse and NFTs make ownership easier. So like, you know, the label, in the example of a band, like a record label, the kind of last thing they have left is the funding to make your music, you know, to actually record your music. And whereas now, like if you're a band and you launched with a load of NFTs and you sold 10,000 NFTs because you had a massive audience already, because they've been seeing you kind of do grassroots stuff. So say you had a whatever 500,000 million followers, you drop NFTs, you do 10,000 for $300 each or whatever, you can make 3 million overnight. And then like the label is becoming less relevant. So like with all these organizations, kind of the things that they had, their gatekeeper access is becoming less relevant. And like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, are really interesting because it's like, yeah, like you say, if you set up a project, you can have all of the members share some ownership in the project from day one, but also vote on various things as well. So they are kind of organizations in part, but they're much more decentralized, right? That's like the fundamental thing that's happening in this whole movement is that like various people can come together who don't know each other and don't need to necessarily trust each other, because you can do it with various voting mechanisms. And I think they'll become really powerful. Like some DAOs that are really successful will challenge big corporations who are slow to move with their kind of like legacy traditional world that they don't want to let go of, because they don't want to give ownership to loads of kind of fans, because for them that means they get less money. But for the fans, you know, it's you could have a whole basically kind of fan owned and supported band now, and you don't really need the label. It's not quite there yet, but so yeah, I think that will happen. There'll be challenges with organization of those people a little bit. DAOs is an interesting area in itself, but definitely like some of the next biggest brands and companies will have that structure where kind of it's user owned and user kind of voted on, I think.
I see. I know, like, look, you have some commitment, so I'll wrap up the interview with a rapid fire. So
Go for it.
you have like 10 seconds to answer the question, and it should be like very short. So
Cool.
Let's do this. Which city is in your travel bucket list?
Cities in my travel bucket list. I would love to go. I've not really done America properly, so I'd love to go to New York. Would be on my list 100%. And also, sorry, I'm not doing the 10-second thing very well. Somewhere like Nashville or somewhere where it's like a real fundamental music background, I think would be cool.
I see. Any book that made a big impact in your life?
I mentioned it in our chat. Yeah, the Bitcoin Standard, I think, I didn't have like a finance knowledge at all, and that really helped me understand what was going on. So yeah, definitely would recommend the Bitcoin Standard. Don't necessarily agree with absolutely everything in it, but it's a great place to start to just understand the future of this like digital world.
Any Twitter handle you admire?
Oh, good question. Put me on the spot now. Yeah, I forget it's Punk something like 4569. I don't know if you've seen him. He's quite famous in the NFT land. If you search Punk for, it'll come up. Does amazing threads. He's like anonymous, but it's like one of the best brains in the space. Clearly is like got into crypto super early, so doesn't have to do anything else apart from think about this stuff. So yeah, does some amazing threads where you're just like mind blown when you read them. So yeah, that would be a handle. Sorry, I've not given you the exact handle, which was the question you asked, but you'll find them, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll check it out.
Your
favorite NFT gaming project?
Oh, good question. I'm going to say Chicken Derby because I just think it's going to be fun and ridiculous, and it's all these chickens who have different powers, and you can race them for money. And I think that'll just be really funny, and I think it'll probably be bigger than most people think. There's one called Guild of Guardians as well. Like if you're into kind of old school gaming stuff, I think you'll like that. And they're specifically building for mobile play to earn games, which I think is a big market that's going to be disrupted. So Guild of Guardians, I think, are onto a good thing.
I see. What's your favorite community on Discord?
Nice question. I'm gonna shout out the Crypto Baby Punks. I do have one, I should say, but they are cool. They're very chill. There's lots of interesting people in there. They were an OG project. For anyone who doesn't know, obviously there's the Crypto Punks, which are very famous. But the Baby Punks aren't officially related to them, but their traits are made of like two parent punks. So you can go and find out who your parents are, and also it's just a lot of people who were in quite early but really welcoming and really nice. And they were like the first community that I joined, and they were very nice to me. So I'd recommend checking out the Crypto Baby Punks. Yeah.
What is one guest you want badly on your podcast?
Oh, a guest I want back. Yeah, that is a good question. Who would I love to have on? I'd like to talk to Jimmy ETH. He goes by J1MMY ETH. He is the one who I think has been heavily involved in this NFT Bored Ape band that Universal Music have signed, and they are releasing as a project. So I'd love to just have a chat with him about what's coming. So that would be cool. I have messaged him, so I'll see if he comes on.
Awesome. And my last question is, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, nice one. Favorite movie of all time? It's going to be like a bit of an obvious answer, but like The Matrix is just amazing, and especially for this space as well. Like it's good, isn't it? Because you just don't necessarily fully believe the completely unplugging from this world, but you certainly can learn some stuff that the media and the TV doesn't tell you. So I feel like you can kind of unplug from everything that you're just absorbing every day and be like, what's actually going on here? And that's where like Bitcoin and the metaverse becomes really interesting, because there's actually a lot more stuff going on that you're not going to be told from watching mainstream stuff all the time. So the whole idea of kind of unplugging from what you're consuming, I think is an interesting idea. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Luke, for being on the show. It was quite insightful. I learned a lot, and I admire you sharing all of your knowledge and thoughts with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on. I loved it, and great questions. And yeah, we'll catch up again soon, I'm sure. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your